Good morning, my dear friends. I hope you all are doing great. So let us start our work for today. Our question 41 is here. In which of the following reaction glucose is reduced to sorbitol? So my dear friends, the glucose is reduced to sorbitol. So let's see the reactions here, my dear friends. The glucose in presence of bromine water. Bromine water is a mild oxidizing agent, correct? And Fehling solution is also oxidizing agent. Tollens reagent is also oxidizing agent. And the last one is sodium amalgam. Okay, that sodium amalgam is basically a reducing agent. So your answer is D option, because we are telling here glucose is reduced to sorbitol. This guy, bromine water, is oxidizing agent. It will oxidize the glucose. Fehling solution is also oxidizing agent. It will oxidize the glucose. Tollens reagent will also oxidize the glucose. But this sodium amalgam is basically the reducing agent. It will reduce the glucose. So our answer is D option. So my dear friends, directly you can write down that D option is the answer without solving it. Okay? Now let us solve it actually. What happens if we take a glucose molecule with us, CHO, CHOH 4 times, CH2OH. This is our glucose molecule. We know that bromine water, Fehling solution and Tollens reagent, they are oxidizing agents. So my dear friends, we have here oxidizing agents with us. So who are those oxidizing agents, my dear friends? Have a look. Correct? So we have here bromine water. We have here Fehling solution. And we have here Tollens reagent. These are all oxidizing agents. We have them as oxidizing agents. So these are oxidizing agents. They will oxidize the glucose, okay, into gluconic acid. So all of them will oxidize the glucose to gluconic acid. So I will be getting here COOH, CHOH 4 times CH2OH. This is known as gluconic acid. So in these three reactions, if you see that if your glucose molecule is treated with bromine water, Fehling solution or Tollens reagent, these substances will convert your glucose into gluconic acid. So these are oxidizing agents. So I will write down bromine water or Tollens reagent, or you can say Fehling solution, will oxidize glucose into gluconic acid. So my dear friends, in all the three cases here we will get gluconic acid. So I will write down here, I will be getting here gluconic acid, here also gluconic acid, and here also gluconic acid. So I told you that this is our answer because sodium amalgam is basically a reducing agent. In aqueous medium, it's a reducing agent. It will reduce the glucose into sorbitol. So let us understand this reaction D also. Okay, my dear friends, I hope you would have written this reaction here. So look here, you can see here, aldehyde group is basically oxidized to carboxyl group. So aldehyde is oxidized to carboxyl group, correct? So aldehyde is oxidized to carboxyl group by these substances, bromine water, Fehling solution and Tollens reagent, correct? So let's talk about the D option now, which is our answer. Have a look here. Let's talk about here now CHO. CHOH 4 times CH2OH. That is glucose. Okay. Now we have a reducing agent here, sodium amalgam. Sodium amalgam is basically a reducing agent here. So I can call it as a reducing agent. What happens? It will reduce this CHO group. Aldehyde group will be reduced to alcoholic group. So this aldehyde will be reduced to alcoholic group. Have a look. CHO will be converted into CH2OH. So you are getting here alcoholic group, then CHOH 4 times CH2OH. This is known as sorbitol. Correct? So I will say that aldehyde is reduced to an alcoholic group. In previous case, aldehyde was oxidized to carboxylic acid. But here, aldehyde is reduced to alcoholic group. Okay? So aldehyde is converted to alcoholic group, OH group, correct? Now this is glucose and this is sorbitol. So I will say that glucose is reduced to sorbitol by sodium amalgam. So my dear friends, here we have sorbitol. Please remember that. So that D option is our answer. Dear friends, which one of the following reaction of glucose gives oxide? So these are all reactions of glucose with the given reagents like HNO3 nitric acid. Let's take it as a concentrated nitric acid here. Conc we can take. Concentrated HNO3. When glucose interacts with concentrated HNO3 nitric acid, glucose can interact with hydrogen iodide in presence of red phosphorus at 373 Kelvin temperature. Glucose interacts with oxygen. The glucose interacting with hydroxyl amine. So in which of the following reactions the glucose will give oxime? Correct? I told you last time, if you remember, the oxime will be produced by glucose with hydroxyl amine or hydroxyl amine. Correct? So our answer will be the D option. So D option basically here means the glucose interacting with hydroxyl amine will produce basically the oxime. Correct? So let us understand this question properly. Let us see the first reaction, glucose interacting with concentrated nitric acid. If you have a glucose with you, it interacts with the concentrated nitric acid. Concentrated nitric acid is a strong oxidizing agent. You should remember that. Concentrated nitric acid is nothing but it's a strong oxidizing agent. When it's a strong oxidizing agent, okay, it will oxidize two groups here. One is aldehyde will be oxidized and the primary alcohol. So two parts will be oxidized here. Primary alcohol and this one is aldehyde. My dear friends, strong oxidizing agent, concentrated nitric acid will oxidize the aldehyde group of glucose as well as primary alcohol. This is primary alcohol, CH2OH. Okay. So what will happen when aldehyde is oxidized? It will be oxidized to carboxylic acid. Then CHOH 4 times, and this alcohol, primary alcohol, will be oxidized first. It will be converted to aldehyde and finally it will be converted into carboxylic acid. That means basically the primary alcohol will be finally converted into carboxylic acid. Correct? So two groups are there basically if you look. First thing is here, you have an aldehyde. Aldehyde is oxidized to carboxylic acid. So from this aldehyde we are getting carboxylic acid. That is oxidation. And this is our primary alcohol. CH2OH is our primary alcohol. It is also converted into carboxylic acid. But if you look, it is converted first into aldehyde, then abruptly it is converted into the carboxylic acid. So finally you are getting carboxylic acid here. So my dear friends, your primary alcohol is also converted into carboxylic acid. Correct? And this is now having two carboxylic acids. So we can also call it as dicarboxylic compound containing two carboxylic groups. And it's also known as stearic acid. So it's a stearic acid. So my dear friends, when you talk of concentrated nitric acid, it's a strong oxidizing agent. It will oxidize the aldehyde to carboxylic group, as well as it will oxidize the primary alcohol. CH2OH is the primary alcohol, this one. It will oxidize the primary alcohol also to carboxylic acid. Correct? So what should I write here now, my dear friends? Concentrated nitric acid oxidizes aldehyde group and primary alcohol of glucose into carboxylic acid. Okay? So my dear friends, concentrated nitric acid oxidizes aldehyde group and primary alcohol CH2OH of glucose into carboxylic acids. Okay? And what is produced here? Stearic acid is produced. Okay? Which results in the formation of stearic acid. Which results in the formation of stearic acid. I hope my dear friends you have understood. Please make note of this. So we will be getting here stearic acid. Let's take on the second B option after this. I hope you have written, my dear friends. Let me take on the option B. Option B is basically the glucose interacting with, let me remove this thing now here. Let's write it once again. So here you have CHO, CHOH 4 times, then you have CH2OH, that's your glucose. Glucose in presence of hydrogen iodide and red phosphorus at 373 Kelvin temperature, what happens? This glucose molecule is converted into two substances, CH3, CH2, 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 CH2 and CH3. This is a straight chain of hexane, it's called as normal hexane. And it's also converted into one more substance here, CH3, CHI, CH2, CH2, CH2 and CH3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 2-iodo hexane. Now you will be thinking that you have only one glucose molecule here at this place. This is just a glucose molecule, only one. But here you are getting two products, N-hexane and 2-iodohexane. How is it possible? My dear friends, if you think, if you have 100 molecules of glucose, let us suppose. How many molecules? 100 molecules of glucose. And this N-hexane, let us suppose, you are getting here 75 molecules of N-hexane. Then remaining will be 25 molecules. So this will be here 25 molecules. So my dear friends, if you have 100 molecules of a glucose, okay, so the 100 molecules of glucose, let us suppose, will give you 75 molecules of N-hexane and 25 molecules of 2-iodohexane. But if this is 80, let us suppose, if this is 80 molecules, then obviously this will become 20. That means when any of the substance gives you two products here, so you should not think that this is only one substance and I am getting two substances here. No, not like that. If this is 100 molecules here, and you are getting a mixture of N-hexane and 2-iodohexane, understand that if this is 80 molecules, this has to be 20. If this is 95 molecules, it has to be 5 only. I hope you have understood, my dear friends. That was the second point. So here our product will be N-hexane and 2-iodohexane. Please focus here. So I will write down here, we are getting N-hexane here plus 2-iodohexane. Let's take on the third one, which is glucose C6H12O6 plus O2. Oxidation is taking place. You will be getting carbon dioxide plus water and energy, and that energy is stored in the form of ATP molecules. So you will be getting 38 ATP molecules. Let us suppose if it is a cellular respiration. As a cellular respiration, one molecule of glucose can give you carbon dioxide, water and 38 ATP molecules. Please remember this point here. So my dear friends, let me balance this reaction. 6 times, 6 times and 6 times. This is balanced reaction now. So you will be getting here, my dear friends, carbon dioxide 6 times. Let me take this also 6 times here. Plus 6 times water plus 38 ATP molecules. If this is a cellular respiration taking place in cells. So now finally we have the last one here. Glucose interacting with hydroxyl amine or amine, you can say. And there is a formation of oxime will be formed. So let us see that. The last one. Have you written this thing? Okay, cool. So let's talk about now the last one. The glucose CHO. Okay. Then you have CHOH 4 times CH2OH. Now this aldehyde group should be written like this. So this is your aldehyde group. Then you have hydroxyl amine or amine, you can say. Let's talk about that. I can write down hydroxyl amine like this, NH2, this NH2OH. So NH2OH. This is known as hydroxyl amine. Hydroxyl amine or amine, you can say. Correct? So what happens is this carbonyl group will give oxygen and this guy will give 2 hydrogen. So there is a loss of water molecule minus H2O. Then this carbon will react with nitrogen here. So have a look here. CH double bond NOH. This NOH will interact with the carbon here. Then you have CHOH 4 times. Then you have CH2OH. So my dear friends, this is your oxime. You can also call it as glucose oxime or simply you can write down it as oxime. So my dear friends, have a look here now. You'll be getting here oxime. So your answer is the D option. I hope you have understood, my dear friends. My dear friends, how many secondary OH groups are present in fructose molecule? So let's understand about it. If we draw the structure of fructose, it's like this. C double bond O, 3, 4, 5 and 6. CH2OH. Third carbon has OH group on left side. Fourth has right. Fifth also has on right side. 2 terminal CH2 groups. This is your primary OH. This is your primary. This is the primary. Okay. So here we have primary alcohol and primary alcohol. And if you look here at this carbon is secondary carbon. So this OH group, look here, this OH group is your primary OH because it's present on the primary carbon. This OH is also primary OH because it's present on primary carbon. Primary carbon means the carbon which is attached to one more carbon directly. Okay. But if you look at this carbon and this carbon, you will find out this carbon is directly linked to 2 carbons, one up and one down. So this carbon becomes secondary carbon. So OH group on secondary carbon becomes secondary OH group. This carbon is also secondary carbon because it's directly attached to 2 carbon, one up, one down. So this OH group also becomes secondary OH. This carbon is also attached to 2 carbons, up and down. So this is secondary carbon. So OH group on secondary carbon is secondary OH. So we have here 1, 2, 3 secondary OH groups. So in your fructose molecule, you remember, you have first of all CO is nothing but it's a ketone. So here we have a functional group. In fructose, functional group is your ketone. Correct? Second thing, primary OH groups are 2. Remember that, first and the last. So primary OH groups are 2 in number. So secondary OH groups are 1, 2 and 3. So 3 are secondary OH groups. So I need this one. How many secondary OH groups are there? 3. So my answer is A option is my answer. Please make note of this. Dear students, let's come to the question number 44. How many phenylhydrazine molecules are required to convert glucose into osazone? So my dear friends, how many phenylhydrazine molecules are required to convert glucose into osazone? You know that phenylhydrazine is like this. This is your phenylhydrazine. If you remove one hydrogen, it becomes C6H5. Then you have NH single bond NH2. This can be also written as this term C6H5 NH then NH2. This is your phenylhydrazine, my dear friends. So how many phenylhydrazine molecules are required to convert glucose into osazone, we have to tell. So let us start with our work. This is your phenylhydrazine molecule. Dear friends, let's take on the glucose molecule here. This is our glucose molecule. Let me open up it a little bit. CHOH 3 times CH2OH. Correct? Now let's take on first phenylhydrazine C6H5 NH then NH2. So just now I told you this is our phenylhydrazine. This is our phenylhydrazine. This H2 will interact with the carbonyl group. So these two hydrogens will come out with oxygen of carbonyl group. So 2 hydrogens from NH2 group and 1 oxygen from carbonyl group will come out in the form of water, H2O. So what will we be getting? We'll be getting here CH, double bond N, NH, single bond C6H5 will have. Then we have CHOH, then CHOH whole thrice, then we have CH2OH. This molecule is our glucose molecule, correct? Then what happens in second step, you will understand. Have a look here. I will once again take C6H5, NH and NH2. I have taken exactly the same molecule and this molecule is again phenylhydrazine we have taken. So I am taking one more molecule of phenylhydrazine. But what happens this time? Have a look. We don't have any carbonyl group here. First of all, this hydrazine, phenylhydrazine was reacting with carbonyl group. It was giving oxygen, it was giving 2 hydrogen and water was lost. So I was getting this combination here, correct? After that, we don't have any carbonyl group here. So what happens in second step when carbonyl group is not there? There is a loss of 2 hydrogen atoms. So this hydrogen at second carbon and this hydrogen at second carbon. So first carbon and second. So second carbon will lose 2 hydrogens. So second carbon will lose 2 hydrogens. So I will tell you here, loss of 2 hydrogens, okay, will take place. 2 hydrogens will be lost. So that will be obviously your oxidation will take place. So loss of hydrogen is oxidation. Gain of oxygen is also oxidation. Loss of hydrogen is also oxidation. How many hydrogens are lost from carbon number second? 2 hydrogens will be lost. Correct? 1 hydrogen will go and interact with this NH2 group. Look here. This NH2 group will go and interact with this hydrogen. Correct? And this hydrogen, which is another here, which is also lost, it will go and interact with NH group, correct? So what will happen, this NH2 will interact with H, it will become NH3. So you will be getting here minus NH3, ammonia is lost here. So total how many hydrogens are lost? 2 hydrogens. Loss of 2 hydrogens basically here means oxidation, loss of hydrogen is oxidation. So one hydrogen interacts with NH2 of phenylhydrazine and NH2 is converted into NH3 called as ammonia. Another hydrogen will interact with NH and NH will change into NH2, but it will be still linked with C6H5. So you will be getting here C6H5, this one, C6H5, and NH will interact with this H, another H, to make it as NH2. So this is also minus. So this is your aniline. So 2 molecules are lost here. One is ammonia and one is aniline. And these 2 hydrogen atoms which are lost, which is the oxidation process. So second step is basically oxidation. Loss of 2 hydrogens. One goes and interacts with NH2 to make NH3. Another hydrogen goes and interacts with NH to make NH2. Linked with C6H5, so makes it aniline. So you are getting aniline here. And now what remains here? Carbon and oxygen will remain here. Carbon and oxygen will remain here and it will become ketone. So you will be having CH, double bond N, single bond NH, single bond C6H5. So second carbon is your C double bond O now, because carbon and oxygen is still there. So then you have CH, OH, whole thrice, then you have CH2OH, correct? After that we will bring one more phenylhydrazine molecule, C6H5, NH, NH2. Why we are bringing one more phenylhydrazine? Now we have a carbonyl group, because phenylhydrazine can react with the carbonyl group. So here we have a carbonyl group, ketonic group, carbonyl group. So this phenylhydrazine will interact with this carbonyl group. So hydrogen will be lost and H2 will be lost here. So total loss is water. So my dear friends, when water is lost here, what is the product formation? Have a look here. CH, double bond N, single bond NH, single bond C6H5. Then you have finally C. C will make double bond with nitrogen. Double bond with nitrogen, single bond NH, single bond C6H5. Then finally CHOH whole thrice. And then you have CH2OH. And this molecule is osazone. So my dear friends, finally we are getting the osazone molecule here. Now our question is that how many phenylhydrazine molecules are required to convert glucose into osazone? Have a look here. You have taken 1 phenylhydrazine, 2 phenylhydrazine and 3 phenylhydrazine molecules, and finally you are getting osazone, correct? This is also known as glucoosazone. Glucoosazone. So total how many phenylhydrazine? 1, 2 and 3 are required to convert it. So 3 is our answer, my dear friends. So in this process we have converted basically glucose into osazone, okay? And in this entire process we have used 1 phenylhydrazine, 2 phenylhydrazine and 3 phenylhydrazine molecules, correct? And finally we got the osazone. So 3 is the answer. And one more important point I want to tell you, that is, in this entire process, if you look, the byproducts formed are, if somebody tells you that what kind of byproducts are formed, okay, when glucose is converted into osazone, correct? So byproduct will be here, water is a byproduct, ammonia is a byproduct and aniline is a byproduct. So you are getting 3 types of byproducts, water, ammonia and aniline. Please remember that point also. Three byproducts we are getting, water, ammonia and aniline. And how many phenylhydrazine molecules are required to convert glucose into osazone? We require 3 phenylhydrazine molecules. Please remember that particular point. Dear friends, let's look at the question number 45. In E. coli DNA, what is this E. coli? Let's have a look. It's basically, E. coli is a bacteria present in intestines of healthy healthy people and animals. Correct? And what is the role? It helps in digestion of food. Okay, so it helps in the digestion of food. So my dear friends, E. coli is nothing but it's a bacteria. It's found in the intestines of healthy human beings and animals. What is the role of this E. coli bacteria? It will help in the digestion of a food. In most of the cases, it helps in the digestion of food. Correct? So now what happens? In E. coli DNA, so this guy will have a DNA, it's a bacteria with a DNA. The AT by GC ratio, AT is nothing but adenine thymine upon guanine cytosine ratio is given to me is 0.93 is the ratio. So how much is the ratio of AT upon GC? 0.93, correct? If the number of moles of adenine in DNA sample, so they have given me the moles of adenine. How many moles of adenine? We have here this much number. What is that? It will be 4,65,000. So that means the number of moles of adenine, it's a nitrogenous base, in the DNA sample of E. coli is 4,65,000. Correct? Then calculate the number of molecules of guanine present. So in place of molecules you can write down here moles. Okay? Calculate the number of moles of guanine present. So it's a very easy thing. My dear friends, I hope you would have written this point. E. coli is a bacteria present in the intestines of humans and animals, and it's useful in the digestion of a food. Correct? My dear friends, have a look. We know Calgroff's rule, if you remember. Calgroff's rule. What is this Calgroff's rule all about? Everybody is aware about it? You know that according to Calgroff, adenine has a nitrogenous base, complementary nitrogenous base thymine in DNA. And remember, cytosine will have a complementary base guanine. The ratio of adenine versus thymine and cytosine versus guanine ratio in a DNA molecule, correct? Will be how much? This ratio will be always 1:1 and this will be always 1:1. This is Calgroff's rule. I have already discussed about Calgroff's rule. So what is important point here? If the number of moles, you can take in place of moles molecules also. This is just for understanding this question, okay? Of adenine in DNA sample. How much of adenine is present in the DNA sample? 4,65,000 moles, or you can take molecules also. It's your choice. So now, my dear friends, we know adenine. Okay? Adenine is how much in a DNA sample? In a DNA sample, our adenine is, have a look here, 4,650,000. So this much of adenine I have. Then how much of thymine I will have? Because we know according to Calgroff's rule, the ratio between adenine and thymine should be 1:1. If this is 10, adenine is 10, the thymine should be also 10, then the ratio will be 1:1. If adenine is 1 lakh, the thymine should be also 1 lakh, then only the ratio will be 1:1. So it is given to me, this thing is given. This thing is given. And this thing is also easy because ratio should be 1:1. So when ratio should be 1:1, then what will be this here? Obviously, if this is adenine 4,65,000, then thymine should be also 4,65,000 to maintain which ratio? 1:1 ratio. So obviously you will be having it, and this guy should be also, so that the ratio, overall ratio will be 1:1. Which rule? Calgroff's rule. Very easy. So adenine was given to me and I found thymine also. How? Because I know that adenine and thymine ratio should be 1:1 according to Calgroff's rule. Now, if you look at the question, calculate the number of moles of guanine. I need to find out guanine now. So that means I have to find out this thing now. Remember one thing, don't compare here adenine versus guanine. Why? Because don't compare thymine with guanine. Because these two are equal, A and T. A is always equal to T and C is equal to G. A will be equal to T in DNA. C will be equal to G. But remember, A will not be equal to C or T will not be equal to G. Remember, equality is here only between A and T, C and G. Don't think that this is 1:1, this is also 1:1. If this is 1, this is also 1, they are equal. No, not like that. It's a ratio between A and T and it's a ratio between C and G. Don't compare them. Don't compare A and C, T and G. Correct? So we need to find out number of moles of guanine. Let's go back to our formula. AT by GC ratio is 0.93. That means A plus T upon G plus C. Okay? This ratio is given to us as 0.93. Correct? We know that how much is adenine and how much is thymine. We have found it. Adenine was this much and thymine should be also this much because ratio should be 1:1. So adenine and thymine we know 465,000 plus 465,000 upon G plus C is equal to 0.93. Correct? Now my dear friends, if we sum them up, right? So what is the value here? 0, 0, 0. It will become 10, then 12, and 1 will become 13. 1 will carry and 9. Okay? So let's have a look here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So ones, tens, 100, 1,000, 10,000, lakh. That means we are getting 9,30,000. So 9,30,000 is A plus T upon G plus C is equal to 0.93. Now I will take this 0.93 down and G plus C on this side. So what should I get, my dear friends? I will get G plus C is equal to 930000 upon 0.93. Correct? This 0.93 can be also written as 93 into 10 raised power minus 2. 10 raised power minus 2 will go up, it will become 10 raised power 2. So 2 more zeros will come here. So it will become G plus C is equal to 930000 and it will bring 2 more zeros divided by 93. So it will become G plus C is equal to, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So ones, tens, 100, 1,000, tens, a lakh, 10 lakh. So G plus C is equal to 10 lakh. So G plus C is equal to 10 lakh. And we know that the ratio between G and C is also 1:1. Together, G plus C together are equal to 10 lakh. My dear friends, G plus C together are equal to 10 lakh. Then how much will be G? G will be just 5 lakh. Because if G is 5 lakh and C is 5 lakh, correct? So together they will be how much? 10 lakh. Why I am saying G should be 5 lakh and C should be also 5 lakh? Because the ratio between G and C should be 1:1. They are 10 lakh. So one should be 5 lakh and another one should be also 5 lakh. If this value is coming out to be here, let us suppose 10 only 10. Then G will be 5 and C will be also 5. So 5 plus 5 is 10 and ratio will be what? 1:1. I hope you are understanding, my dear friends. So I will remove this part here. So I will take that G plus C value. So what will be the G plus C together are equal to 10 lakh. What will be G equal to? G will be equal to half of that 10 lakh. That is ones, tens, 100, 1,000, tens, and lakh, 10 lakh upon 2. Half of it. So it will be 5 lakh. Ones, tens, 100, 1,000, tens, and lakh, 10 lakh. So just 5 lakh I need here. So G will be 5 lakh. So it's like this, my dear friends. This will be 5 lakh plus 5 lakh will give you 10 lakh. So the answer will be here. B option will be the answer. Okay, I hope you are understanding, my dear friends. Let us see here. Ones, tens, 100, 1,000, tens, and lakh. 5 lakh will be the answer. Why I am saying that G will be the half of 10 lakh? Because 10 lakh is actually G plus C. Correct? I hope you understood. Please make note of this. Dear friends, let's go to the question number 46. Which one among the following does not answer bi-unit test out of all these? Urea, protein, peptide or carbohydrate? My dear friends, if you look, okay, what is a bi-unit test actually? Bi-unit test. Bi-unit test is basically given by those substances which contain CONH groups. Correct? Those substances which contain CONH group gives bi-unit test. And you know that our urea also contains CONH group. Protein also contains CONH group. Peptide is also made up of amino acids. Correct? So it also contains CONH group. But carbohydrate does not contain CONH group. So this carbohydrate will not answer the bi-unit test. Carbohydrates will not give bi-unit test because it does not contain CONH groups. CO and NH groups it does not contain. So please, my dear friends, let's have a look here. In bi-unit test, what happens? First of all, we are taking alkaline solution of, you can take proteins, you can take alkaline solution of urea, you can take alkaline solution of peptides. Correct? To this alkaline solution of proteins, urea, peptides, what happens? Add 1% of copper sulfate solution. So 1% of copper sulfate solution is added. So due to the addition of this, what happens, what we get is basically, we get copper plus 2 coordination complex. Okay. So what we are getting a copper plus 2 coordination complex. And remember, this copper plus 2 coordination complex, it is formed by copper plus 2 with CO and NH group, CO and NH group of a protein, urea or peptide. So copper makes a coordination complex, and that coordination complex of copper plus 2 is with CO and NH group of protein, urea or peptide, and it has a violet color. Color of this complex is violet. I hope, my dear friends, you have understood this thing. In short, I will write down here, bi-unit test is given by those substances which contain CONH bond. Directly I will write down which contains CONH bond, or you can say which contains CONH groups, correct? Or you can write down CONH bond. So any substance which contains CONH bond will give the bi-unit test, because I told you this copper coordination complex is formed between copper plus 2 with CO and NH of protein. What is that CO and NH? I will tell here, CO and NH groups of protein, urea and peptide, because everybody knows about that. In proteins we have a peptide bond, that is CONH bond only, correct? And even in urea also we have CONH group. Peptide is also a part of protein only, so it also has CONH group. So my dear friends, I hope you have written this thing. But carbohydrates, if you talk about, they contain carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So they don't have nitrogen in their structure. Carbohydrates contain carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. You can take an example of carbohydrate here. Let us suppose sugar, glucose. Does it contain any nitrogen? What I need CO and NH. So NH group should be also there. But in glucose you don't have nitrogen. When you don't have nitrogen here, that means there is no chance of CO and NH group. In fructose you have CO group, but nitrogen is not there. My dear friends, you don't have CONH group in case of sugar molecules because they don't contain nitrogen. So they won't give the biuret test. Biuret test will be given only by the urea. If you look at urea now, my dear friends, NH2, C double bond O, and I will say here NH2. Have a look here. CONH is here, CONH is here. So it will give the biuret test, correct? If you look at protein, everybody knows about protein structure. NH2CH, then you have R1, then you have here, my dear friends, CONH, a peptide bond is there, H, R2, then COOH. If you look here, this will be here blocked, this will go here N times, this is the protein structure here, CONH is also present here in the protein structure. Same is the case here also in proteins and peptides, both contain CONH. Urea also contains CONH, but your carbohydrate does not have CONH, correct? Even if you draw the structure of fructose also, have a look, CH2OH, let's suppose it's a fructose molecule, CHOH, 3 times 3, 4, 5 and 6, CH2OH. It has only CO, it does not have NH. So carbohydrate will not give, does not answer biuret test. So our choice is carbohydrate only. Okay, and I have given an example of here fructose. I have given an example of fructose here. It does not have CONH group, so it will not answer. Please make note of this. Dear friends, let's look at the question number 47. Aspartame. This is your artificial sweetener. My dear friends, you will study in detail about artificial sweeteners in chemistry in everyday life chapter. But here we will be mainly talking about aspartame, and we have taken its structure. We have to find out how many functional groups does it have in its structure. We have to find out how many functional groups are present in this aspartame structure. Aspartame is basically artificial sweetener. Now you will be thinking, what is artificial sweetener actually? Let me give you an idea. For example, if any person is diabetic and has a hyperglycemia condition, that means the blood sugar level has increased, or in that patient the blood sugar level increases, it becomes more than normal, then that person suffering from hyperglycemia, okay, cannot have more sugar because the blood sugar level increases in the body. So what we should do actually is that we can give an insulin injection to that guy. That is a treatment, correct? So insulin will reduce that sugar level from the blood. It will make it normal. But my dear friends, if such diabetic people want to have sweets, okay, they want to have sweets, but they can't take sugar, that is a problem. So they can prepare the sweets. Remember this point. The patients, diabetic patients suffering from hyperglycemia can make the sweets by using aspartame, that is artificial sweetener they can use. What is the role? You may be thinking that this aspartame will enter into the blood later, okay? So when it enters into the blood, there is no metabolism for aspartame. What happens? It will give the taste. When a diabetic person will eat the sweets made up of aspartame, sugar, so it will give taste, so they will feel the taste of that. And later, that aspartame finally will enter into the blood, correct? And in blood, aspartame metabolism will not happen at all. Okay? The aspartame basically, will go directly to the kidneys, and through the urine it will be excreted out, or it will be thrown out via urine without any metabolism. So aspartame does not have any metabolism process inside our body. It's only for the taste. It goes into the blood, finally to the liver. Liver does not do anything with the aspartame. Finally to the kidneys, and from kidneys via urine it comes out. So that means the aspartame will not increase the sugar in your, blood, sugar level in your blood. because it's excreted out very fast via urine. So my dear friends, what we need to do, it's an artificial sweetener and it's a peptide. Why we call it as a peptide? Because it has a peptide bond. CONH is a peptide bond. Look here. One more thing I would like to tell you. Just now we have done one test, Biuret test. What is required for the Biuret test? CONH group is required. CONH group is required for Biuret test. That means it will give Biuret test. Why? It will give Biuret. It's a peptide. First thing, it's a peptide. It will give Biuret test. And Biuret test means it should have CONH bond. Does it have CONH bond or not? So it will give Biuret test. Correct? First thing. Now what is our question here? How many functional groups does it have in its structure? We have to find out. How many functional groups are there? Let us see. If you look at this COOH, this is your carboxylic group. It's a functional group, carboxylic group. If you look at NH2, it's an amine group or amino group, you can tell. It's also a functional group, amino group. If you look at CONH, this CONH group is nothing but it's amide, or we can say peptide group. So 3 functional groups. Then COOCH3 is nothing but it is similar to COOR, like that. That is nothing but it's ester. So my dear friends, we have here 4 functional groups. Ester, COOCH3 is nothing but COOR. R is here CH3, correct? So it's ester. CONH is a amide or peptide group. So second functional group. Third functional group is COOH, carboxylic group. Fourth functional group is amino group, NH2 group. So total number of functional groups are 4. I hope you have understood, my dear friends. Please make note of this. Dear friends, let's look at the question number 48. In which of the following reaction tyrosine amino acid is produced? So if you look at the first one, urea, in presence of urease enzyme. So urease enzyme will convert your urea. Urea is NH2, C double bond O, NH2. It will give me 2 things actually. This NH2 groups will change into, NH3, and then CO will change into carbon dioxide. Let's have a look. If I have a urease, if I do hydrolysis, like I have OH here. One hydrogen will go here, one will go here, it will become NH3, NH3, and CO will accept one oxygen to make CO2. So you will be getting here ammonia plus carbon dioxide. So ammonia plus carbon dioxide. Protein in presence of pepsin will give me peptides. Correct? So after that, phenylalanine is amino acid. In presence of phenylalanine hydroxylase, this enzyme, phenylalanine hydroxylase, will convert phenylalanine into tyrosine. So amino acid phenylalanine will be converted into tyrosine by an enzyme called as phenylalanine hydroxylase enzyme. Correct? So this is the answer here. The last one, glucose in presence of zymase, will give you obviously an ethanol. That is nothing but your alcohol. So it's used for the production of an alcohol. This is all for today. Have a great time. Thank you.